History remembers the conquerors. It certainly remembers the sultans who forged the Ottoman Empire, one of the mightiest the world has ever known. Their names are carved into palaces, and their victories fill gilded manuscripts. But history is also a place of shadows, full of voices that were deliberately silenced. And in those shadows, you find the stories of the conquered. Not just the soldiers who fell on the battlefield, but the women who were taken after the fighting stopped. These were princesses, duchesses, and queens who almost overnight found their crowns replaced with chains. For these women, capture wasn't just a loss of freedom, it was the start of a grinding process designed to unmake them, to erase every trace of who they once were. The Ottoman Empire had built a powerful system of assimilation, a kind of gilded cage where a woman's past was a liability and her own will was a threat. So what happened when a queen, a woman raised to rule, to command, to be obeyed, refused to be unmade? What happened when she stood before the most powerful man on earth and defied him? This is the story of what the Ottomans did to those who refused to bend. It's a story of psychological warfare, waged in silent, perfumed rooms, of punishments designed not just to break the body, but to crush the soul. It reveals how an empire, at the peak of its power, dealt with its most challenging captives, the queens who dared to remember who they were. The air in the throne room was thick with incense and fear. Before the Sultan, ruler of half the world, stood a queen who had lost everything: her kingdom, her army, and her freedom. But she hadn't lost her will. When the Sultan offered her a place in his harem, a life of gilded captivity, she met his gaze and uttered a single word that would seal her fate: no. For a captured queen in the Ottoman Empire, defiance wasn't just an act of courage, it was the death sentence for her identity. Before the Ottoman sails appeared on the horizon, her world was one of order, privilege, and power. Picture a European princess from a small kingdom or a noblewoman from a Balkan dynasty. Her life moved to the rhythms of her own court. She wasn't just a woman, she was a symbol of her people's sovereignty, her bloodline a living testament to their history. Her name was spoken with reverence. Her marriage would have been a matter of state, a tool to forge an alliance, secure a border, or end a war. She was a political asset, yes, but in a world she understood, a world where she had rank and dignity. Her days were a tapestry of duty and ritual. She would have presided over her own household, received ambassadors, and played her part in the intricate dance of European politics. Her Christian faith was the bedrock of her identity. Her future, though constrained by gender, was one of significance. She was meant to be a queen consort, a regent, or a powerful dowager, her influence felt for generations. Her name, her title, these were the pillars of her existence. They gave her authority, value, and a voice. But the winds of change were blowing from the east, and when the Ottoman army arrived, all those pillars would turn to dust. The conquest was swift and brutal. The armies of her father or husband were swept aside by the disciplined might of the Janissaries. In the chaos of the fall, she became a prize of war, no longer a queen, but a kafir, an infidel captive. The moment of her capture was the end of her old life, and the second, her identity became a target. Chained and guarded, she began the long and humiliating journey toward the heart of the empire that had just devoured her world, Constantinople. Every step took her further from the woman she had been, and closer to the object the empire intended her to become. For many in the West, the word harem conjures up fantasies of a sensual paradise full of beautiful women lounging on silk cushions. The reality, especially for a captured noblewoman, was far darker. The Ottoman Imperial Harem wasn't a palace of pleasure. It was a highly structured and guarded institution designed for control. It was, in essence, a prison disguised as paradise. Upon arrival, a captive entered the secluded labyrinth of the harem. This was a world run by women, but ruled by the Sultan's will and enforced by eunuchs. At the top of this pyramid wasn't the Sultan, but his mother, the Valid Sultan, who wielded immense power. Below her were the favored consorts, the mothers of his children, and then ranks of trainees and servants. A newly arrived captive, even a former queen, usually started at the very bottom. She was now an odalisque, basically a chambermaid. Her crown and titles meant nothing. In fact, they were a threat to the system. The whole point was to erase them. Her name, the name of her royal house, was replaced with a new, poetic-sounding Turkish name, like Gulbahar, Spring Rose. This wasn't a nickname, it was the erasure of her heritage. Next came her faith. While the Ottoman Empire was often tolerant of Christians and Jews, within the palace, conformity was the price of survival. A captive was pressured to convert to Islam. Refusal meant a life of menial servitude. Her cross would be taken, her prayers silenced, her Bible replaced with the Quran. She was no longer a Christian queen, she was now, in the eyes of the court, a Muslim slave. She would have been forbidden to speak her native tongue and forced to learn Turkish, a crucial step in severing her connection to her past. This re-education was formal. Girls were trained in music, dance, poetry, and Ottoman court etiquette. But this was an indoctrination. They were being shaped into suitable companions for the Sultan, taught to be pleasing, obedient, and, above all, silent. For a woman who once commanded respect, being disciplined and judged like a child was a profound and calculated humiliation. However, not every woman entered this way. A diplomatic bride, brought in as part of a political treaty, might be spared the harshest aspects of this process, her status recognized from the start. For most captives, survival meant submission. They learned the rules, adopted their new names, and whispered their new prayers, hoping to catch the Sultan's eye and carve out a life in the cage. A single look from the Sultan could elevate a woman from a nameless slave to a favored consort, granting her luxury and a precarious kind of power. This was the path of adaptation. But not every queen could walk it. For some, erasing their identity was a fate worse than death. They were raised to believe in their own worth. To be stripped of their name, faith, and dignity wasn't a transition. It felt like an amputation of the soul. It's from fragmented records and whispered histories that we can piece together what happened when a queen decided to resist. The moment of defiance often came during the first presentation to the Sultan. After weeks of indoctrination, a captive of high birth might finally be brought before the master of the empire. This was the ultimate test. The expectation was clear. She would be beautiful, demure, and grateful. The Sultan might offer her a gift or ask her name, expecting to hear the Turkish one they gave her. And in that moment, she might refuse. Perhaps she speaks her true Christian name. Perhaps she makes the sign of the cross in a room where only the crescent held sway. Or perhaps, when offered a place in his bed, she looks him in the eye and says, "No." In the silent, pressurized world of the harem, this was an earthquake. It was a direct challenge to the Sultan's absolute authority. It was a declaration that, despite everything, she was not his property. She was still herself. It was a conscious choice to reclaim her identity, even for a moment. But in the Ottoman system, there was little room for such defiance from a captive, and the price for it could be unimaginably high. Once a queen defied the Sultan, she became a problem to be solved. The system that had been designed to assimilate her could now be used to crush her. The response wasn't always a quick death, which could be seen as merciful. The punishments were often more psychological, designed to serve as a terrifying example. According to historical accounts, isolation was a common first step. The defiant woman could be confined to a small, dark cell, cut off from all human contact except a guard. For a queen used to a bustling court, the crushing silence was a form of torture. If isolation failed, the punishments could escalate. Starvation weakened the body and clouded the mind. Physical abuse was also a tool. While the Sultan wouldn't dirty his own hands, his enforcers would. One of the most feared punishments was the falaka, where the soles of the feet were beaten with a cane. Excruciating, humiliating, and a punishment typically used on common criminals. The humiliation could also be made public within the court.
Some highborn captives were forced into menial servitude, made to scrub floors or serve meals to lower-ranking women who had been more compliant. Every task was a ritualistic degradation. In the most extreme cases, for offenses like infidelity, the punishment could be a quiet, anonymous death. A disgraced concubine could be put in a weighted sack and thrown into the Bosporus at night. This chilling method left no trace, no body to be mourned, no grave. It was the ultimate act of erasure. This wasn't random cruelty. It followed a brutal logic. The Ottoman Empire was built on conquest, and control required the projection of absolute authority. A defiant captive was a symbol of resistance, and her spirit had to be broken to show the futility of defying the Sultan. Her suffering was a performance for the other captives, who watched and learned the terrible cost of saying no. These stories, hidden in the margins of history, reveal a world of incredible brutality, but also of incredible resilience. The system was designed to break them, but the human spirit doesn't extinguish that easily. If you find these forgotten narratives as compelling as we do, take a moment to subscribe and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss the stories we're unearthing next. While the fate of most defiant women was tragic, history is always filled with complexities. Not every highborn captive was forced into the same mold. The story of Mara Branković, a Serbian princess, offers a fascinating counter-narrative, showing how a royal Christian woman could navigate the Ottoman court, not through defiance, but through shrewd diplomacy, and keep her identity. Mara was the daughter of a Serbian ruler. In 1435, she was sent to marry Sultan Murad II to secure a fragile peace. She entered the harem not as a slave captured in war, but as a diplomatic bride. This gave her a different status. Critically, historical sources agree that Mara never converted to Islam. She remained a devout Orthodox Christian her entire life, right in the heart of the Muslim Empire. This was exceptionally rare and likely tolerated because she was more valuable to the Sultan as a Christian bridge to the Balkans. When Murad II died, the new Sultan, Mehmed II, soon to be Mehmed the Conqueror, held his stepmother in incredibly high esteem, calling her mother and treating her as a trusted advisor. He allowed her to return to Serbia, but her story with the Ottomans wasn't over. After fleeing family disputes, she returned to the Ottoman Empire, and Mehmed welcomed her, granting her a personal estate that became a small Christian court in exile. From there, Mara acted as an intermediary between the Sultan and the Christian powers of Europe. She used her unique position to protect Christian communities and even had a say in appointing Orthodox Church patriarchs. Mara Branković's life shows the Ottoman system wasn't a monolith. Her royal blood, the political context of her marriage, and her own sharp intelligence allowed her to carve out a unique path. She wasn't broken or erased. She became a powerful stateswoman in her own right. Her story is powerful precisely because it highlights the importance of context. She entered the system as a diplomatic peer, not a captive of war. For thousands of other noblewomen taken by force, the machinery of assimilation was their only reality. If Mara represents the path of diplomatic exception, another woman took a third route. Not open defiance, but cunning adaptation and ruthless ambition. This is the story of a captive who didn't just survive the system, but mastered it, rewriting its rules and becoming more powerful than any queen born to the title. Her name was Hürrem Sultan, known to the West as Roxolana. Unlike Mara, Hürrem was not a princess. She was a nameless girl from modern-day Ukraine captured by raiders in the 1920s and sold in the slave market. She entered the harem of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent as just another girl, given the name Hürrem, meaning the cheerful one. But Hürrem had a fierce intelligence and an unshakable will to thrive. She quickly caught Suleiman's attention with her wit and joyous personality. She became his favorite, a dangerous position constantly under threat from rivals. But Hürrem did the unthinkable.
Instead of just being a favorite, she forged a genuine partnership with the most powerful man in the world. When Suleiman was on military campaigns, she wrote him intelligent letters, advising him on palace politics and state matters. She was becoming his most trusted counselor. Then she shattered centuries of Ottoman tradition. First, she convinced Suleiman to formally marry her, making her his legal wife, an unprecedented move that elevated her from slave property to empress. Next, she broke the one mother, one son rule, bearing Suleiman's 6 children and binding him to her completely. Even more shockingly, she persuaded Suleiman to let her stay in the main palace in Constantinople instead of following her sons to provincial posts, keeping her at the center of power. Hürrem's rise was not without blood. She was utterly ruthless. Historians widely believe she orchestrated the downfall of Suleiman's Grand Vizier, Ibrahim Pasha. Most notoriously, she is implicated in the death of Suleiman's firstborn son and heir, the popular Shehzada Mustafa. Through a campaign of whispers, she and her allies convinced Suleiman that Mustafa was plotting to kill him. In 1553, Suleiman summoned his son to his tent and had him strangled. With Mustafa gone, the path to the throne was clear for one of Hürrem's sons. The captive slave had risen to the most powerful woman in the Islamic world. She didn't defy the system, she mastered it. Her legacy was the dawn of the Sultanate of Women, a century where the women of the harem wielded extraordinary political power. She proved that the path to power wasn't in remembering the queen she had been, but in becoming the queen the system never saw coming. The story of a captured queen in the Ottoman Empire is a story of a collision between two worlds, one of inherited royal status and one of absolute conquering power. For many of these women, stripped of their names and faith, this collision was utterly destructive. The Ottoman harem was a powerful institution of control, designed to systematically dismantle a person's old identity. Defiance was an act of profound courage, but it could lead to isolation, punishment, or a silent death. The goal was to demonstrate that no one was beyond the Sultan's reach. Yet within this brutal framework, people found ways to endure. The life of Mara Branković shows that under specific diplomatic circumstances, a woman could retain her identity and wield great influence. Her story, however, is a sliver of light in an otherwise dark narrative. More transformative was the path forged by Hürrem Sultan, who rose from anonymous slavery to the pinnacle of power. She showed that a captive, by embracing the system with enough cunning and ruthlessness, could achieve a level of authority most European queens of her time couldn't dream of. But her rise came at a terrible cost, paid in blood. So when we look back into the perfumed shadows of the imperial harem, what do we see? We see a prison designed to erase identity. We see a political institution designed to consolidate power. We see the tragic, forgotten stories of countless women who were broken. But we also see an undeniable resilience. The defiance of the nameless, the diplomacy of Mara, and the ambition of Hürrem are all testaments to the different ways women fought to survive, to matter, and to be remembered in a world built to make them disappear. Their stories force us to ask a haunting question. When trapped in a system of absolute power, what is the greater victory? To die holding fast to the identity you were born with, or to master the rules of your own captivity and one day rule the cage itself? The history of empires is filled with powerful stories left in the shadows. If you want to help us bring more of these forgotten histories to light, please consider liking this video and sharing it. And let us know in the comments, do you see Hürrem Sultan as a brilliant strategist or a ruthless murderer? We read all of your thoughts. Thank you for watching.